Thank you all for coming. This is an incredibly important topic, I think. As we were speaking a little bit earlier, this is a time of tremendous anxiety, I think, for many people in government. The administration has requested reform plans from every agency. They have an eye to reshaping and shrinking government in some cases. And we have with us three executives who have been deeply involved in that process in their agencies. So we're grateful for your time. So I'd like to start because VA, SBA, and Interior are very different agencies, very different priorities. I'd like each of you to sort of recap for us where things stand at your agency with regard to reform and this administration's agenda and what the big issues are for you. So, Peter, can we start with you?
Yeah, as far as where we are, the VA is the second largest government organization behind DOD, and they saw even before President Trump came in, they've seen for a long time that it's unsustainable. You know, the demand for our services for veterans continues to increase. That means you need more resources to do it. And you can't just keep pumping more resources into an organization. So they started looking at ways to modernize, is the term now, or optimize the workforce. And so some of our agencies were able to do that. NCA, our National Cemetery Administration, has consolidated all of their HR into a single location in Indianapolis. So they're kind of our model. That's kind of the benchmark, and that's kind of the direction I want to go to. We've started consolidating in the VBA all retirements into Topeka, Kansas. And so that had started. We're looking at classification and consolidating that. We have a classification center of excellence in Detroit, Michigan. And so we're looking at if that's capable of consolidating even more. But in that, we're a long ways away, in that I still have 172 HR offices across the VA. There's no centralized governance and control around those. And so we have disparity of decisions. We have very inefficient, ineffective business model. And so my vision is consolidating even more and finding the best way to optimize services to the workforce. And I truly believe that the NCA model and the Amazon model and the Microsoft model, you consolidate your HR services. You get an IT infrastructure that can support your services to take as much off of the HR workforce as possible in making self-serve and management self-serve. And we're moving in that direction. We're in the process of an IT upgrade, and that's going to take about 60% of the work that our HR employees are doing right now. It's going to take that away from them and automate it. And so then we're going to have to level set the skills that we need. We want to move more to a human capital consulting organization rather than a tactical HR organization. And so we have several years of work to do. But like I said, before President Trump even came in, this organization was looking to do that. So I'm kind of a little bit ahead of the game because they were thinking about it.
Right?
Yeah, sure. At Interior, and I think maybe similar to what Peter was suggesting, is that there's no such thing as an original idea. The idea about trying to find efficiencies and working smarter isn't new. But many times in the tyranny of the present and trying to get things done for the American people, we have to pivot away from that. And what's kind of unique in this reform plan and the changing of this administration, and I've been doing this for about 23 years now, is that we really are trying to bring together a roadmap that's tied not only through our planning efforts, but also tying it to our strategic plan, bringing in our OMB stakeholders, as well as identifying the various forms of legislation that will be needed to make this work, right? So I've seen kind of reform plans that are being done in pocketed environments. What I think this time is a little unique, it is a little bit more holistic, and dare I say, even a little bit more strategic. And to that end, going back to what good government is all about and finding efficiencies and working better together, perhaps that time is here and now. And so within the Department of the Interior, where we manage your public lands and your waters and partnering with the various tribal forms of government around the country, we have a very disparate mission. You know, we have over 70,000 employees in 2,400 operating locations, operating in about 380 occupations. So we're a little bit of everything to everyone. And with that said, we will have our organizational structure similarly dispersed, and those silos reinforced with various forms of appropriation and authorization. And so when we kind of slow down, and this is where I think HR in particular is a strong strategic partner, is that we have the data. We know where the work is being done, we know where their skill sets are within an organization, and we know where that is tied to the mission. So we have an opportunity to look at our silos, look at the work that we're doing, and where are those natural connections? Simply, where is the business case? And I think that's where we are right now with Interior. We're identifying the business case. We believe that we're identifying the various measures to support us in that direction. I think it's a terribly exciting time right now. And the only thing I would say to my other civil servants out there is, I guess, what's the one constant in the federal government? Change, right? And we're moving from more transactional to strategic, and dare I say, we're problem solvers. And that's what's being asked of us today. And that's why I think it's exciting.
Elias?
Yes, thank you so much for this opportunity. At SBA, I'm in a different situation than Peter and Ray. We obviously have a smaller organization, approximately around 2,000 employees assigned to my organization. But what we have done in terms of the agency reform plan, we have put together an advisory council committee that was comprised of senior executives in the organization. And basically what we did is we looked at the organization based on the guidance given by the OMB director, as well as the presidential executive order that came out in March of this year. And we basically are looking at the policies that we currently have to ensure that we eliminate any policies that are getting in the way for the organization and the managers to be able to deliver the results that we are expecting of them. We are looking at the internal business processes to ensure that we eliminate redundancies and make more efficient processes in support of the organization. We also took a look at the organization in general in terms of the structure of the organization. And what we are doing is actually eliminating some of the layers of the organization to ensure that we have more an ability to delegate and empower our managers and supervisors to make decisions at the proper level of the organization while utilizing information capabilities to provide the data necessary for them to make informed decisions. You asked, what's the status of our reform plan? We have already submitted, obviously our plan to the Office of Management and Budget, and we were actually given the liberty to execute some of the recommendations that we made to the director of OMB, recommendations that we have control of within the Small Business Administration for us to be able to implement some of those things. In the area of human capital management, obviously, we are in the process of migrating from the National Finance Center into the Department of Interior Business Center to provide us automated capabilities for us to do processing of transactions, the time and attendance, the onboarding process, and all of those things. One of the things that we'd like to do in the future is expand those capabilities to provide other shared service capabilities for the organization so the HR consultants can become more effective in providing the advice and the guidance that they need to provide to the managers and supervisors, and for all of us to be at the table when strategic decisions are being recommended to the administrator.
So I'm curious, for all three of your agencies, these reform plans that you have submitted, they've all been submitted to OMB
Correct.
at this point.
Yes.
What's the bottom line? Are you cutting people at VA? Are you expanding in places at VA? Same at Interior. Are there cuts? Are you growing? I mean, tell us kind of what the organization how it would look differently from what it looks like today.
Yeah, and I think what's critically important is our modernization plans are targets. And so oftentimes in government, they say you have to make cuts, and we cut first and then try to figure out how to get to where we're going. And it puts an undue burden on us because we can't get the day-to-day stuff done under the system that we're currently under is kind of broken and inefficient. And now you're going to cut people away from it and do the cut first. And so I would advise all of you to battle vehemently for the resources you have right now and show that down the road you're going to get to a target. So I've been doing that. They were starting to cut people and freeze hiring. I said, you cannot do that. I've got a workload that's sitting on our plates right now. And you want me to take tiger teams and people to build a modernization plan to get us where you want to be, right? So I've fought for current resources and to even bring in contract support to clean up some of the stuff that I'm facing right now. And then I'm showing them down the road, I'm going to consolidate. I'm going to set up centers of excellence. I'm going to have regional HR centers. I'm going to have a new IT system. And over the next several years, as these things come online through attrition, we're going to shrink the HR force by probably 50%. So it's going to be a big shrinkage there.
And that's, you have about 7,000 people across the agency, is that
right? And then if you look at the 301s, we've got another 16 to 18,000 301s, and a portion of their job is doing HR stuff. So I'm really taking a look across the board at what we're doing and how we're doing it. I'm fortunate, and you see my title is Human Resources and Administration. So I have the opportunity to look across all of those enterprise level, department level services that go across everyone and see how best to deliver those services to a widely distributed workforce and start pulling in efficiency in all of these. And so we own it at the headquarters. We have all the expertise at the headquarters and how we're doing our implementation. And as I've set a vision, we need to move to this, to regionalization, to consolidation, and then each of those experts are working with the stakeholders and the field expertise and figuring out together the optimization plans. So in the plan we give to OMB, it's kind of a general umbrella. Hey, we're doing a few things here and there, but internally we've got expertise in each of those functional areas, working with the stakeholders to build a modernization plan to get all of us moved forward over the next couple of years.
So those are thousands of jobs that will potentially go away.
Mm-hmm.
And for people in those positions out there, what are there going to be opportunities in new
Yes.
positions, or will they
Absolutely.
be encouraged to move
one
on?
of the first things we've already implemented already, we wanted to move customer-facing HR services out of the DC area. We just can't compete for talent here. We have people in the field at GS7, GS8 level, and it's GS12 or 13 in DC, just so we can attract the talent we need. And so our VACO, our VA central office, had its own HR department, and I've already shut that down. And so this was suddenly 40 people or so that were out of jobs. We're placing all of them, right? So we're fortunate in that we have a very large organization. We have over 380,000 employees. And so we're finding skill sets. They've got priority hire. We've got an an internal personnel placement office that's working with them and working with different organizations across the VA and finding where their skill sets match up with current vacancies. Modernization doesn't happen overnight.
Sure.
When you have an organization, you have a natural attrition rate. People retire, people move on, people get promoted, and so you hope that through attrition, you eliminate a lot of those positions and people move on. And those who don't, we either are going to reskill them, we have the capacity to retrain people within the organization and move them around within our organization. So I'm very confident that at the end of this, there won't be much unwanted attrition in that, people aren't going to be like riffed and put out of jobs.
How about
Yeah.
at Interior?
Well, I do think there are, I won't say two competing interests, but one is certainly around the budget, right? I mean, power of the purse. They give us the budget and we got to figure it out. And so depending on what that budget is, and there are proposals and then there's what actually is appropriated through Congress, sometimes those numbers don't always align, and sometimes they have different priorities embedded in that. So we have to create some room for flexibility to deal with both possibilities. But clearly what we're focusing on first is around the realignment of our workforce. Most of our partners are out west. Our national parks are everywhere, but some of the larger parks are out west. We manage about 75% of all the water that's east or west of the Mississippi. So we want to get closer to our stakeholders. And when we think about the administration of what happens within Washington, D.C., we have about 6,500 employees. We have about maybe 9,000 in Denver, but there are a lot of other operating locations in which one of our guiding principles is to put our people where our stakeholders are. So to the extent that we will be looking at geographic moves, meaning as FTEs attrit, assigning them out to a more regional structure is something that we're going to do. Is that by itself cost effective? Moving people around as a federal employee is not a cheap proposition. So we're going to have to do this smartly and in proper sequence. In moving people, assigning FTEs out, and when we look at the types of skills that we need, as we discussed already, there are going to be some opportunities around support services that can come together in a shared service model that perhaps we don't need as many HR people or as many IT people or budget or acquisition types of support services, because there's a lot of people who do that really well right now. Maybe we need more engineers, more scientists. That could allow us to shift FTEs to expanding and emerging occupations. So I don't think we're going in at it at a mindset that we're cutting FTEs. We're always going to work to our budget. There's no doubt about it. And if that allows us an opportunity to repurpose some of those funding areas to meet our need to put our services more in the field, then we're going to do that.
So Interior made headlines recently with by moving around about 50 senior executives. Is that part of this reform plan? Can you put that in context for us? And how to what extent do you anticipate non-voluntary reassignments being part of the shift in priorities, which we should probably clarify is really to increase energy production on federal land?
Right. And there's certainly a sequencing to that. I mean, let's agree. I believe we're all in the SES right here. Going back to the purpose of the SES is to create a mobile leadership cadre of executives who could go out and work in different areas, but optimize their leadership competencies and solve problems. And so our cadre of around 275 SESers, there was a component of them in which we are identifying where our future needs and goals are. And so part of that was moving some folks to different jobs. Some were still within the area. Some were outside a geographic location. That is something that is part and parcel of what happens when you join the SES. And I think we're going to have similar steps. So what we did in addition to that is we went to OPM and OMB and saw very broad VERA VSIP authority, because we want to be transparent. We want to say what the future of the workforce is going to look like. And if this is something that perhaps wants to go into your thinking about your retirement plans or your second career or third career, let's kind of figure out how to make that available. So we haven't received final approval yet, but we went kind of broad, asking for a lot of positions. And as the workforce considers their retirement options, that can allow for more promotional opportunities for the workforce, the reintroduction of some new skill sets, maybe even thinking about career paths and bringing people in at lower grades, learning the business, and then growing and having a longer career with Interior. So we are looking at that. as a way to kind of be moving our employees via VSIPs. And then as additional information comes in, because we are asking for some legislative proposals, as those start to iron out, that will start to crystallize kind of some of our next steps.
So is it too soon to say, sort of, do you have numerical targets for
I think
workforce reductions?
Not so much broadly. We are looking in the Washington, D.C. area. We're under hiring controls, right? So it's not a hiring freeze, but if you're looking to backfill a job in Denver and D.C., you are going to have senior level approval within the department to fill that position, because the expectation is we need to shrink our footprint in DC and Denver to move those jobs out. Numerically, we don't necessarily have a target, but it's kind of that expectation that if that work can be performed in the field, we should do it. And dare I even say virtually, because that's okay too.
So, Elias, you have been given, permission from OMB to begin some of your restructuring initiatives. Tell us what those are and what you are empowered to do just within the framework you have.
Yes, Catherine. Obviously, the administrator, we received the green light for OMB. There's some communications that's going to occur in the organization to disseminate that information to the employees. That information has not been distributed to the employees yet, so I'm going to be refrain.
Feel free to share that right here.
Specifics. But what I was going to say was in regards to my organization, and one of the things that I learned a long time ago when you are a leader of an organization is that leadership will show whenever you have to accomplish a job or a mission with limited resources. And that's what's happening in our organization. So our organization, as I mentioned to you, we don't have FTEs in abundance to come by. So we have decreased the number of FTEs since the 90s to what we are today, about 49%, as I mentioned earlier. So what we are doing is being very strategic in terms of how we are filling the vacancies in the organization. And Ray mentioned that they have hiring controls. We are still hiring in SBA, but we do have an executive team that look at every hiring action that is being proposed with the intent that, number one, ensure that it's in alignment with the agency reform plan, and number two, figuring out how we can better do that job. Now, this is all in consultation with the leaders of the organization. I don't want you leaving here with the idea that we control all the hiring because we have leadership in place. They make those decisions, but when they come forward to us, they give us the business case to be able to recruit for those particular positions. And we are very, very careful how we recruit in the organization. Your specific question was, are we going to reduce the workforce and all those things? And my simple answer for you would be this: we will be in alignment with our budget. Now, our budget is going to obviously be decreased slightly. So therefore, we have to look into the organization to see how we can slightly reduce the FTEs in the organization. The one thing is clear, and the administrator made this clear to all the entire workforce when she conducted a town hall at the beginning of the information that came from OMB and after the presidential executive order came out, is that we are not going to be doing a reduction in force in SBA. We are not going to be offering Vera VSIP at SBA. There is so much attrition that is already taking place in the organization that we're going to manage the agency reform and the adjustments that we need to make based on our budget, based on the attrition that's going on in the organization. But we are also investing on some new talent in the organization. Ray mentioned there's an opportunity in our organization to reclassify some of the position descriptions so we can build the workforce that we're going to need into the future with the proper skills, allow them to develop and have leadership opportunities in the organization so we can be in a better position when we do have the high attrition numbers that we currently have in the organization.
Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering how, these are very significant changes for all of your organizations in different ways. I have sort of two questions. One related, how are you planning to communicate this information to the workforce? When change, for some people will be exciting, for other people it will be very discouraging.
They're scared. They're flat out scared.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how are you planning to roll this out, communicate it? And secondly, part of that, have you been working with the unions? We had a previous panel here today, and it's very clear there's a lot of distrust, and that can really be a stumbling block. And I'm wondering if that's something you have tried to address at this point, or if that's coming. So, Peter?
We have about 280,000 of our employees are represented by unions. So a lot of this is complicated dealing with unions. My position going in and why I took this job, I was a Marine for 24 years myself, disabled veteran myself. And so I took this role to serve veterans. And my position going in is I'm here to optimize service to veterans. And any barriers to us or our workforce doing that have to be eliminated. And people who work with us, the unions that work with us, the contracts that work with us, all need to understand that we are an externally facing service. We're serving the veterans who serve this country. Less than 1% of our great country puts on a uniform and defends this country to give us all this greatness, to make America the greatest place on earth. And so I hope to convey that message across to everybody we work with, that this is not a self-serving venture. It's not us against you. It's we are in this together to optimize veterans' affairs in order to best serve veterans. And we just had our executive 2-day offsite. We have over 1,700 facilities across the country. Puerto Rico, which is getting hammered. The Virgin Islands getting hammered a second time. So we have a lot going on all over the country, but the executives paused for a day and a half to all come here and talk to the secretary, to talk to us assistant secretaries about the direction we're going. And it's very gratifying to see all of them looking at us for answers and wanting to be part of the solution. So that's part of our communication there, is bringing them all together, explaining, hey, we're all in this together. We've got a direction to go. What we're doing right now is unsustainable, as I said at the outset. We cannot keep pumping more and more resources into an inefficient system. We all have to come together and figure out how to make it as efficient as possible. And the additional part of that is we cannot be making decisions from Washington, D.C. Ray has that as well. He's spread all over the country. You can't have D.C. dictating out to your operations what we're going to do in the direction we're going to go. It has to be a bottom-up approach. Let's bring in those people who are on the front line. Let's bring in some of those mid-level managers. Let's bring in some of those regional directors. Make a tiger team, and let's figure out together how to modernize and change the organization. That's how you communicate it. You make them part of the change. Make them stakeholders in the change itself, and respecting that the change is impacting them and they get to be part of it. Even when you disagree and you have to make command decisions because of the situation you're in, because they were in and included in the conversation, they're much more apt to buy into the direction you have to go.
No, and I think similarly, I guess my best advice, and again, advice that I received early in my career during these times of, if you want to call it tumult, change, realignment, is to do something very simple. Breathe. The Republic has been around for a while, and we're going to be great at this. But again, this idea about somebody sitting in an ivory tower dictating the future, and this is all going to happen in a vacuum, simply does not happen within the federal government. James Madison made very sure that wouldn't happen, and I think we make him proud every day. And along with the Fourth Estate, the unions, there are many stakeholders who are invested in our success. I don't recall even the number when the public call did go out to give recommendations on how our agencies should serve them. We're talking tens of thousands of Americans submitted their ideas online, in which they were then transferred to the agency's heads, and they were looking and say, hey, that's a pretty good idea. So it's going to take a lot of people. It's going to take some patience, and it's going to find out where those proverbial low-hanging fruit's going to be for us to move out. There's certainly some authorities within an agency itself that it can do but many times, and more times than not, it's going to need the both implicit and explicit approval of many other partners. And so, through transparency is going to be the best way for us to move out and take advantage of this time that's presenting us, early in administration, some new ideas, some new ways of doing business. I think that window will shut pretty quickly if we don't take advantage of it now. And so, to that end, it's going to take just a lot of people to make this work. And, and our secretary has gone out. It's kind of advantageous being the Secretary of Interior. We have some pretty cool places to go visit, and he's taking advantage of that. And so while he's out there, he is talking to our employees. He is giving them his idea of what the future looks like. So, we are communicating on our priorities. And the more we do that, and then we fill in the information gap as Congress makes its decisions, we are also taking advantage of partnering with sister agencies as we look at through the permitting process, whether it's a NEPA review or whether it's oil and leasing gas. This involves multiple agencies. Again, the redundancies are out there. So we can no longer work in a silo. We are actually reaching out to EPA. We are reaching out to the Army Corps of Engineers. We are sharing with them our roadmap of where we think our customers are and where we can get work done. Do you want to join us? Can we work together on this? And maybe even share some administrative support services while we're doing it. So I just want to kind of say that there are a lot of vested interest groups in what we're trying to do, but there are a lot of them. And if we're going to do this right, the best way to do it is through transparency and communicating to our employees.
And you'll do that through town hall meetings, through communication?
And even through social media. I check my secretary's Twitter feed every day, right? Because things in DC actually move pretty quickly, right? And so we could be thinking about, okay, this is kind of in the hopper, we're going to move out on this, there are a couple of different options. But when he's ready to roll out and approve something, sometimes I will see the returning memo with the signature. Sometimes I'll first hear about it online. So there are many ways for us to communicate out to the employees, through town halls, through all employee emails, through social media, through our leadership team, as far as what those next steps are. And of course, our wonderful fourth estate.
Well, we'd be happy to disseminate your plans, believe me. So, Elias, how are you communicating with them, employees?
Yeah, I'd like to add a little bit of information. Obviously, as I mentioned before, we have committed the senior executive team to be part of this transformation that we are doing at SBA. There's a couple of things that we are doing. Obviously, engaging the bargaining union, which has been at the table with us in terms of the agency reform plan, and we have had certain negotiations that have taken place already. So they are really in support of what we are doing in our organization. But there's one key component that I haven't even mentioned, and that is that one of the things that we are doing in our organization is improving employee performance. And what that is what we want is every employee to be part of this process. We want every employee to be accountable for the accomplishment of the organization. So we are putting a heavy emphasis in training our managers and supervisors, in training our employees with regards to how to properly put in place performance expectations in negotiation with their managers and supervisors, and looking at our internal policies to eliminate some of the things that throughout the years we have put into our internal processes that is prohibiting or hindering the ability of the managers and supervisors to do what they need to do. So what I would say is that we are focusing on results. The times of us being able to do a job because we've done it that way for many, many years is pretty much over with. We are putting a lot of emphasis in the performance management process, starting at the senior executive level all the way down at the lowest level of the organization. But the communication, we have obviously an agency communication plan that's going to be rolled out. I think that the key thing is, as I mentioned before, at the beginning of this process, the administrator had a town hall meeting and was very clear with the managers and the employees of the SBA by indicating that the issue about not having a reduction in force, not having a Vera VSEP activity in the organization, but she made it very clear that every person is valuable in this organization, and they need to bring their level of performance up so we can accomplish the goals and objectives of the organization.
So the whole issue of performance management and all the things we've talked about previously really speaks to a shift in HR as a function. We spoke earlier, HR used to be very transactional. Here are your benefits, here's how to sign up. That's all changing. It certainly has changed in the private sector. The role itself is much more consultative. Peter, you mentioned you're cutting the HR workforce by 50%. That's a very significant change for that the profession within your organization. How are you going to achieve that? That's a very different skill set.
That's right. Well, I'll tell you, the beauty of it is, and by the way, do not be deceived with the number of employees. As I mentioned to you, we have 2,000 approximately employees in SBA. I came from the Department of Veterans Affairs. I was chatting with Peter earlier. Magnificent organization, and they had a lot of resources. We are in an organization with limited resources, but the challenges are the same. The IT system difficulties are the same. The relationship with the managers and supervisors are basically the same. So what I would tell you is that in my organization, I have the privilege to be everything because I'm the Chico of SBA. I'm not only work on the policy piece of the human capital program, but we also do operations, where in some of the larger organizations you have the Chico office and then you have administrations beneath the Chico offices where the operation is being done in field operations. In my organization, we do it all. So I think to answer your question, are we capable of doing this shift that needs to happen in support of the agency reform plan? I can tell you with 100% degree of exactitude the SBA is ready for that. Now, there are some skills that we are still pursuing in terms of data analytics and being able, I'm a very data-driven person. I don't like to talk to the leaders of the organization about a particular issue in terms of the human capital program unless I have done my analysis of the data and been able to build the business case conversation that we need to have. And that's one skill that I do see that we need to expand in my organization a little bit more, and we are on the way of doing that. But analytics, HR analytics is powerful, and if you don't have that skill in your organization and your HR departments, that's something that I advise you to build upon.
Yeah, and transitioning the skill set, that has to be part of your modernization plan too. We're shifting from a tactical focused HR departments to a strategically focused human capital business partner. And as we move in that direction, you're going to have attrition that's moving people out. But you also have to take a look at those people who are going to be replaced who aren't going to attrit. They've been HR professionals for only a few years, they're new in their career, and setting up the capability to be developing them skills as we move in that direction. So we're helping them make the transition through development.
And just real quickly, again, it's not so much maybe an FTE count, it's just maybe a workload indicator in that when we do look at the transactional, we are taking advantage of technology. We can leverage resources through system delivery to make sure that on the transactional front, we don't fall down. But, again, there are rules. It's HR still feels, and maybe rightly so, a very compliant-laden activity through the merit system principles, the prohibited personnel practices, and the myriad of ways in which employees and applicants can seek redress through due process, through what Congress mandates, through what the courts mandates, and what the executive orders have mandated. So there will always be that level of responsibility and oversight within HR. But a little bit on the transactional side, we probably can save some of those FTEs and redeploy them more into the business analysis. We just have to think smarter. And even we're sometimes our own worst enemy if you think about the classification standards and the qualification standards and which is a professional series, like an attorney, like I used to be, to where HR. It's not a professional series. There's not a mandatory educational requirement. And so we're kind of asking ourselves to become more professional, but yet at the same time, we're not kind of building the stock and building the expectation and the training to move us into that direction. So sometimes we feel like, well, let's go get a Beltway bandit. They do this every day. They'll help us through these business operations. I mean, dare I say, it's really these GS2s and 4s and 5s who grew up in HR. They know where the problems are. They know where the hiccups are. We just need to give them the opportunity and the training and the professional growth so they can give those recommendations at the larger scale to be effective.
I'd like to open it up for questions. If you could raise your hand, I possibly won't see you, but maybe someone with a microphone.
this was a
there
festival.
could have been 0 people in the audience and we wouldn't have known it.
I'm waiting for the beach ball to go up. I thought this was
There
a
we
festival.
go.
Okay,
Thank
here
you.
we go. All right.
And if we could turn these spotlights that are right in our face down a little bit, that would help us see out that way a lot better.
So I think we have a question here.
There's a gentleman in the middle.
Right here in the middle.
Oh, go ahead. The woman with the microphone, you've got it.
Hello, I have a question for Peter Shelby.
Yes?
What is the IT system that you are using? You had mentioned an IT system,
Right.
for, I believe for HR.
Right, so before I got here, they had started implementing PeopleSoft, which is Oracle-based. It may not have been the one I picked, having been around. We were very fortunate when human resource officers, personnel officers got a C put in front of their name and they were elevated to the C-suite. There was a whole bunch of software developers that got into this space. And so they've been competing for years. So the HR systems keep improving and improving. PeopleSoft is good, and Oracle understands that they have to keep developing. We're in the process of putting in 9.2. But there are several modules that we're going to implement, and we have data cleanup. We had a 40-year-old pay system that was COBOL-based. So you can imagine when they did the data transfer, the issues that we had. So we're in the process of just cleaning up data and cleaning up the day-to-day pay issues that have arisen from transitioning into a new system. But once that's in place, we'll have the individual employee self-serve and the manager self-serve. We're also putting in place Salesforce. If you can believe an organization the size of ours with 1,700 facilities, 380,000 people, and they're still carrying around folders, with the little sheet on the top for administrative actions, for employee actions, for employment. I'm like, are you kidding me? Right? So we are behind the power curve in automation. When you have a demand signal from the outside, right? Veterans coming back, they're disabled, they're missing limbs. You are naturally externally focused, right? And you grow exponentially over the last decade or so. I think VA's almost doubled in size because of the demand signal from the outside. So you focus so much externally that you forget that your infrastructure has to keep up with all that in order to keep growing and scaling. We kind of missed that. And now we're trying to catch up with our IT system. So we're going to get there. Everybody sees the problem. They know the solution. It's just a really big problem and complicated, so it's taken us longer than I would personally want. But we're not unique. I just came from the real estate industry in Manhattan, from the richest private real estate company in the world, and they were kind of the same. They started with 1 property, then 2 properties, then all of a sudden they landed this $1 billion contract, and all of a sudden they're the biggest. And when I onboarded with them, I onboarded and filled out paper I-9 form and a paper W-4 form. And we were buying properties out in the middle of nowhere, and we were FedExing boxes of I-9 forms and W-4 forms. And this is a rich, amazing company, but they're the same thing. They had so much work coming into them, they were focused externally, and their infrastructure didn't keep up with them. The difference is they have kind of an unlimited resources and the ability to stop, because they're real estate, they're not veterans that are coming in for medical services every day. They just stopped operations and they completely replaced their IT systems, their pay systems, and their HR systems. We can't do that. right? We have customers that need care 24/7. And so we're trying to modernize, they keep using those analogies, the plane's flying and it's filled with passengers. And we're trying to upgrade the plane as it's moving. So it's going to be very difficult for our organization, but what's wonderful and gratifying is I think we have 380,000 employees that are all aligned with the change, all see that we need to move in that direction, and they're getting in line to support our efforts.
I think we had we have a question here in the center. I think the microphone is almost there.
My previous career was VA, and one of the things that I'd noticed is every time an organization sort of centralized, services diminished. It happened with IT, it happened with contracting, and it also seemed like even when they centralized within the particular site, services diminished, but they diminished further as a function of distance. So if you're looking to decrease the workforce in HR as well as centralize the workforce, what do you guys plan to do proactively to ensure that services remain at a good level?
That's a great question, and that was something, if you don't mind, I'm going to stand up a little bit so I can see people and you can see me. There's a big difference between centralization and consolidation of capabilities, in my opinion, right? And you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's a lot of bad taste in people's mouths because the IT centralization, consolidation of services, was done horribly. And the other one you mentioned, contracting, done horribly. You have to start with the customer needs. Anytime you're consolidating services or changing the way you do business, you have to start with the customer needs and re-engineer backwards. And I put a notional picture out there of what I thought it should look like, and there was like 5 regional facilities. But form follows function. It may be when I'm done with this, I have 20 facilities around the nation, or I have 1. Detroit may be perfect. I've got 1 big building, and they're able to serve the entire VA. But what's critically important when you make changes like this and how you ensure it's done right is the stakeholders and the people using those services have to have input into what you're doing and build the modernization plan with you. And then you start shifting things based on that modernization plan. And we're going to find that equilibrium, right? Like I said, I'm trying to move some stuff out of Washington, D.C. because that makes sense. There's some capabilities that I know for a fact I'm going to be able to centralize into a single, like retirements. I'm going to have a single center of excellence in Topeka, Kansas that's going to do all of our retirements. Labor management relations, on the other hand, is I've got every single clinic and hospital director saying there's no way I can function on a day-to-day without having that person right there with me because those union reps will come right into my office and I don't have the expertise in this. I need an expert this. So that I may not be able to centralize at all. I may still have that HR capability in every single organization. But what's critically important in the change all of you make is you have to start with the customers and the services they need and then re-engineer to optimize those services to them. Okay?
Thank you.
Do we have time for one more question? Right here, this.
Hi there, Bridget Surchak, Voice of America. Just wondering what each of your agencies are doing with regard to looking at or even using / implementing the SLST positions. We used them limited way at DOD and somewhat more at NTSB, my previous employer. SL, for those of you who don't know, is the senior leader designation in the SES cadre, and ST for the technical folks. And I've been kind of shocked at how many people in the federal government literally have never heard of SL or ST, right, and even less use them. And to me, they're supposed to be used for the SES cadre who perhaps don't want to or really shouldn't be in more management functions, but you don't want to lose their expertise and let them, not have the administrative role that the SESers do. But SL and ST are there for people to use, but I just see very few agencies using them.
I'll go ahead and jump on that, and that I'll make my little disclaimer that I spent 10 years at OPM, best 10 years of my life. I'm kidding. I'm a former Peace Corps. That was the toughest job I ever left. But to your point, I think the SLST has a bad brand. And I think it really hits home that we don't do good enough job, and we've been discussing this in the Chico community for a long time about career paths. I mean, so many of our positions are focused towards the SES as far as career progression. Can you imagine getting the same pay without having to supervise anybody? Where do I sign up? And so you have to go through the quota process, the allocation process through OPM. I would say part of our broader civil service reform ideas is we need to expand the use of SLSTs. I won't say I also worked at the State Department for 3 years, loved the State Department, and so many of the attorneys kind of see their career progression, and we felt like, oh, we got to give them SES. No, they should have been SLs. And so we were kind of over-allocating SES positions for something that probably should have been SL and just asking for more authority. So I'm a big fan of the SLST. We should be using it a lot more. And I think when we do discuss the broader civil service reform, we have to talk about career paths and orienting people to those positions. It's a very good point.
Yeah, I can tell you real quickly then, at SBA, we are looking at the SL and ST positions. As a matter of fact, there's a call that we are supposed to be submitting to OPM at the end of this month. It's a SES allocation request, but one of those things that we are addressing in support of the agency reform is also looking at the SL and ST positions in the organization. We have some in my organization, very few, 3. Right now, we are pursuing more. So by the way, SBA is a great place to work. So.
But you're using IPC for shared services, so good man.
So I think, looks like we have time for one more question. Right here in the front. Here.
Chase Gunner with Federal Computer Week. Reorganizations are expensive in the short term, so what costs do you see associated with the reorgs for your respective agencies? How do you plan to manage them? And secondly, are personnel or project cuts inevitable?
I didn't hear the last part of what
can you
you said.
repeat the last?
Sure. Are personnel or project cuts inevitable in the process of the reorganization?
I'm much more fortunate than Elias because he has a total of 2,000 people. I have almost 3 times that just in HR. And so when you transition an organization, there's natural attrition. There's organizations, like I said, I eliminated an organization, but all of those people are going to have jobs. I move things, you said centralization. I'm not centralizing. I'm trying to move stuff out of DC. I'm trying to optimize services. There'll be natural attrition with that. I think we can absorb it in an organization the size of ours, but we're going to get to a point where we have, our attrition rate's about 9%. That's at any given time. I've got 30,000 vacancies. But I'm going to get to a point as we get further down the road and we have less and less non-technical or HR billets and, our vacancies are in the, doctors and nurses and skilled positions. I'm going to have a natural attrition. We are going to lose some people. We're going to do the best we can to place all of them. But absolutely, when you find efficiencies, in that you're going to spend less resources. That's what efficient means. You're getting better at what you do, so it costs you less resources. People resources are included in that.
Ray and Elias?
As I mentioned before, every position, every person counts at SBA, and we do have about a 9.4 attrition rate at SBA. So even though 2,000 employees, we are focusing in that particular aspect of the organization, but there will be some losses based upon the normal attrition. It's just how we address those losses in terms of how we replace them. Do we take advantage of the career path opportunities of our employees? Do we redefine some of the functional statements and position descriptions of the organization to be able to attract the right skills into the organization is part of this equation. But I will tell you, I know that we don't have a lot of vacancies like Peter. I know exactly what you're talking about. We do have approximately about 200 plus vacancies at SBA currently right now. So we are balancing that, the agency reform, the strategies, the human capital strategies in terms of attracting, new talent into the organization. And on top of all of that, we are also supporting the disaster support operation that is currently going on right now. So
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Okay.